We're grateful for the fact that those trade relationships are being right-sized.
General Kane, earlier in the conversation, ISIS came up and the resurgence of ISIS in Syria, given the changes there, are a real concern. How important is it that you think we maintain troops on the ground to address any potential resurgence of ISIS?
Ma'am, I don't recall the conversation being linked to any particular part of the world.
It wasn't.
Yes,
it was just about ISIS. But I'm asking you because
yes, ma'am.
Syria is the most likely place for ISIS to resurge, and we know that there are cells there that are, we've seen it in the last few weeks where they attacked.
Yes, ma'am. I'd be happy to sit with you sometime in a different setting to talk about the CT threats and my views on them at the classified level. I think I'm actually somewhat hopeful around the pressure that we have against ISIS in Syria right now, given the change of government there through a unique set of circumstances that nobody could potentially.
I agree. My concern is the withdrawal of U.S. troops would provide an opening to ISIS.
Yes, ma'am. And of course, I'll defer. That's a policy decision. They'll defer to the Secretary.
Let me just correct the record here before I close. I'm out of time. But, Mr. Secretary, you pointed out that javelins were given to Ukraine during the first Trump administration, and I support that. But I would point out that he was impeached over holding up giving those javelins and equipment to Ukraine. So I think as we look at the record, we ought to try and be accurate about how we portray things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Capito, Senator Murphy, and then Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Hegseth, and thank you, General, and thank all of the men and women every day that serve us and protect us. We're extremely grateful. Secretary Hegseth, you and your team are working on a national defense strategy. I'd be interested to know when you think you'll be coming forward with that. We know that last year the Commission on the National Defense Strategy found that, quote, there's a high probability that the next war will be fought across multiple theaters and would involve multiple adversaries. How are you thinking about these interconnected threats, and how will your national defense strategy establish a new force to meet those challenges? And when do you think that report will come forward?
Senator, it's the right question. It drives almost all of our decision-making, certainly on a topic related to budget. We did an interim national defense strategy almost immediately upon arriving because with a new administration, our planning guidance was from the previous administration that we think had the wrong priorities or some of the wrong priorities. And by issuing that interim national defense strategy, it allowed our building to plan around the priorities of President Trump. So that was, and that interim national defense strategy focused on defending the homeland, a recognition that that is important, our pacing threat in the Indo-Pacific, and then burden sharing for our allies and partners, making sure that they're stepping up so that we can focus where we need to. I would anticipate that our national defense strategy will include a lot of those ingredients, but more fully developed. I would expect late summer.
Okay.
Is if I were to put a pin on it.
All right, Defense Secretary Hegseth there. He's been answering several questions from lawmakers over the past few hours or so. We're going to take our final break of this hour. We'll head right back to that. Don't go anywhere. Welcome into Live now from Fox. We're going to head back out to Capitol Hill as we're listening to Defense Secretary Hegseth testifying. And on the other side of that will be my colleague Stephanie Quinue.
We've seen them falling short, with the exception of the Marine Corps. I want to give them a shout out because they were meeting their goals. You said that they are higher, so I assume you have some of the statistics as to how much the recruitment is up. I'm curious to know for women, if the recruitment up for women and how you see that. Do you have the statistics?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was plenty of pre-criticism that certain groups would not be interested in joining the military in this environment, and we've seen the exact opposite. Because for us, it's not about women or men or black or white. It's about we want the most qualified Americans possible in our ranks who are ready to go, and they have responded. So across the services, the Army's 4 months ahead. The Air Force is way ahead. The Navy's way ahead. And this is we're gonna meet goals well beyond the goals that were reduced by the previous administration because they could not recruit. So we're talking about far surpassing anything that was done before.
Is there one prevailing thought when you're doing your after recruiting, talking to a recruit that's signing up? What's the difference?
The difference is a commander-in-chief they believe in, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Murphy, you're up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. I wanted to build on some of the questions that Senator Schatz was asking, just to try to build a fact predicate for some of the tough spending decisions we're going to have to make here. Just to confirm, I heard you say with respect to the gift of the plane from Qatar that we do not yet have a signed MOU with the government of Qatar. Is that right?
Correct. We're in the process of working through that.
And did you also say we don't have a signed contract with the company that is going to do the work? Or did you say that we have a contract, you're just not willing to disclose the terms?
The terms should not be disclosed of anything related to an aircraft of this type.
So in 2018, when the contract was signed with Boeing to do the upgrades or the new contracts for Air Force One, the terms of that contract were disclosed. They were made public. In fact, it was the Trump administration that issued a press release giving the total as $3.9 billion. Are you saying this time around, even after you sign the contract, you're not going to make public any of the terms of the contract?
I wasn't involved in that previous administration decision, but we're happy to take a look.
The Air Force testified before the House that that contract would likely deliver the new Air Force Ones by the 2028 timeframe. It doesn't stand to reason that you will be able to retrofit the plane from Qatar much sooner than 2028. So I'm trying to understand what the gap is that we're trying to fill. If this contract ends up being $500 million and the gap only ends up being 6 months, that doesn't sound like a wise investment for this committee to make.
Senator, I would defer to the expertise of the Air Force as far as timing of modifications and when that would happen, but there's also been delay after delay after delay on the Boeing side, so I don't know that's a firm fixed date yet, unfortunately, can be counted on.
So obviously the underlying question here is what is going to happen to the plane at the end of Trump's presidency. The president said on May 12th that this plane would be transferred to his presidential library at the end of his term. Is that your understanding of what is going to happen to this plane?
The president said that. That's my understanding, although I would look at what comes out in the MOU.
But why would we ask the American taxpayer to spend upwards of $1 billion on a plane that would then only be used for a handful of months and then transferred directly to the president? That doesn't sound like a wise use of taxpayer dollars.
A lot of the capabilities, as you know, Senator, of that particular platform are and should remain classified. So there are reasons why you might modify, even for a short period of time, an aircraft to ensure the safety and security of the President of the United States.
But when do you believe that those upgrades would be made? How long would the president have it before it got transferred to his personal possession?
That would be a determination of the Air Force that would take hold of it and make those modifications within whatever time window they believe gets it to the place where it need to be.
Yeah, I think this is extraordinary, Mr. Chairman. We're talking about a pretty massive investment of appropriations dollars into a plane that the Secretary is saying is currently planned to be transferred personally to the President. There's a lot of other pending needs that we need to fund. This would seem to be low on the list. Mr. Secretary, one final question. Obviously, you know that there is a concern in the public about a double standard that is applied to protest, sometimes protest that turns violent. The president, when he came into office, issued pardons to the individuals that attacked the United States Capitol, including those individuals who beat savagely police officers. You have deployed the National Guard and readied Marines in a way that many people think is unnecessary given the state and the local resources. So maybe let me ask the question this way so that you can assuage people's concerns that there is a double standard. The National Guard was deployed here on January 6th, and that was a decision made by the Department of Defense. Do you support that decision? Do you believe that that was the right decision to deploy the National Guard to defend the Capitol on January 6th?
All I know is it's the right decision to be deploying the National Guard in Los Angeles to defend ICE agents who deserve to be defended in the execution of their jobs.
But I think it's important to know whether you think it was also important to have the National Guard defending the United States Capitol when there were violent protesters here on the president's behalf, to make sure that folks know that you care about protest, whether it's against the president or on behalf of the president.
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard when that happened and was initially ordered to go guard the inauguration of Joe Biden. But because of the politicization of the Biden administration, my orders were revoked. And ultimately, because of the politics that were being played inside
to make sure that
the
folks
Defense
know,
Department by the previous administration.
But do you support the decision made on January 6th to send the National Guard here to defend
I
the
support
Capitol?
the decision that President Trump made and requesting the National Guard that was denied.
So you do not.
President Trump
you do not support the decision.
Support
you do not
for the
support
National
the
Guard
decision
in
to
advance
send the National
and was
Guard here
denied.
to defend the Capitol. I think that speaks to the worry that many Americans have that there is a double standard, that you are not willing to defend against attacks made on our democracy by supporters of the president, but you are willing to deploy the National Guard to protect against protesters who are criticizing the president. That's not how our taxpayer dollars are supposed to work. They're supposed to be used to defend the United States, no matter the nature or the political affiliation of the protesters. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to follow up on a couple of lines of questioning. Just specifically, Mr. Secretary, what is the authority that the administration is using to deploy active duty Marines to California neighborhoods? What authority?
Senator, the president has constitutional authority in order to support.
Cite the provision of the Constitution.
I'd have to pull up the specific provision, but our Office of General Counsel, alongside our leadership, has reviewed and ensured in the order that we set out that it's completely constitutional for the president to use federal troops to defend federal law enforcement.
Look, I'd like to know the specific constitutional statutory authority. The president made it clear that he relied on Section 12406 of Title 10 with regard to the National Guard troops. I need to know the authority that he is relying upon in terms of active duty Marines being deployed to California neighborhoods.
Senator,
so you'll follow up with me?
Yes, Senator, but there's plenty of precedent of active duty troops being used to support law enforcement. Historical precedent.
I'm not disputing that. I am just asking you to cite the authority under which the active duty Marines are being deployed to California.
It's in the order, ma'am, but we'll make sure we get it to you as well.
Thank you. I want to dovetail on a couple of other comments also with regard to the lack of specific detail in the budget request for the Department of Defense. I take great pride in Wisconsin's contributions to our national defense, and that includes many Wisconsinites who are hard at work building the Constellation-class frigate. There is no mention of frigate procurement, just like Senator Collins noted that there's no mention of destroyer procurement in the budget materials that you provided to this committee. My state makes the frigate. I'd also note that there's no mention of the destroyers, as I said. So really, we are looking at a very incomplete budget request when we are just 4 months out from the beginning of the next fiscal year. Mr. Secretary, this committee takes the appropriations process seriously. I take the hard work of Wisconsin's shipbuilders seriously, and I'd like your commitment to provide this material to the committee expeditiously so we can do our work.
Senator, we'll make sure you get all the information, but what I would say is this is a historic investment in shipbuilding, both the defense industrial base and ships. In Wisconsin, and particularly related to the frigate, it's been a program with a lot of problems and a lot of delays and a lot of modifications that have led to serious challenges.
Navy has called for many modifications to the plan.
I'm not saying that's it's all the fault of the shipyard. There are many ways in which modifications were made that changed an existing design so extensively that it led to a ship that was not even capable of the original mission it was supposed to execute. So our job is to make tough choices on some platforms like that may not be funded the way they were in the past, because we have to make some of those tough choices.
We are continuing to listen to Secretary Hegseth, who is testifying right now on Capitol Hill. We are going to step away for a brief break. I'm Stephanie Quinn, heading right back to this hearing. We'll be right back. Before we head back to Capitol Hill for a hearing where, as Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth is testifying before lawmakers, I did want to share this live look with you as we will be playing this event out once it gets underway. We are expecting to hear from Democratic lawmakers as they mark the 13th anniversary of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, otherwise known as DACA. This is the 13th anniversary of that program. Amid threats of mass deportation, the program was created by the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. However, following a January court decision, the agency will continue to accept and process DACA renewal requests, but will not process initial DACA requests. So this is set to get underway in just about 5 minutes or so, and we will be bringing that to you once it does get underway. In the meantime, we are going to head back to Capitol Hill for this hearing.
Last week or 2 weeks ago, we appreciate that. We all know, everyone in this room knows the strategic role that Alaska plays when it comes to being on the front lines, whether it is the threat from China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. We're sitting up there. We host the backbone of our nation's missile defense there at Fort Greely, advanced fifth-generation fighters at Eielson and at J-Bear, critical long-range radar and surveillance systems throughout the state. We've got key airborne forces at J-Bear, Fort Wainwright. I mean, it's good. It's solid. We appreciate it, and we think that we're in a pretty critical place, and we think that you recognize and acknowledge that we're in a pretty critical place. And yet the FY25 Defense Budget Overview document that was released under the last administration stated that the goal of the budget request in terms of the Arctic was to, quote, develop a monitor and respond approach. I thought that that was a pretty passive approach in a highly critical region. We don't need to go into how many icebreakers we have versus Russia. The good news is that with this reconciliation bill that we're talking about, we move to make a difference in an aggressive way that is really, really important. But I will share with you that I'm a little bit frustrated where we've got stated support for the role in the Arctic region, and I'm assuming that means the U.S. Arctic region. There's a seeming fixation on Greenland that I think sends, I don't know whether it's a troubling signal or a mixed signal, that we're looking past the significance of the U.S. Arctic and the area that is already part of the United States, and happily so. But I like to remind people, everything that the administration wants in Greenland, when it comes to strategic location, when it comes to resources and minerals, we've got it on the U.S. side. So I think any serious Arctic policy has to start with a serious investment in Alaska. We've built it. We need to do more. I would just ask both you, Mr. Secretary, and General Kane, your view of the strategic importance of Alaska and more importantly, the broader Arctic, because this is really, when we're talking about DoD posturing to make sure that we're deterring adversaries came from a relatively uncomfortable exchange with the Army Corps of Engineers. We don't have a deep water Arctic port in the. Everybody says it's important, and the signal of importance that we got was a $3 million placeholder in the budget. To me, that doesn't signify significance.
We are listening in here to continued testimony from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on Capitol Hill. However, we do see that this event that we were previewing has just gotten underway. This is where we are expecting to hear from Democratic lawmakers as they mark the anniversary of DACA amid mass deportation threats.
Challenges and attacks from anti-immigrant politicians, we, the people, have been the ones to keep DACA alive. DACA became a beacon of hope. It promised that young immigrants could dream, live, and thrive without fear. But today, as we witness with outrage and heartbreak the rising wave of cruelty, ICE arrests without warrants, mass deportations without due process, and terrifying raids from Los Angeles to Boston, we are reminded that this fight is about all of us. It's about the kind of country and the kind of world we are willing to stand up and build. A world where no one fears being turned from their home, their job, or their loved ones. A world where dignity, justice, and humanity prevail. Now, more than ever, we must rise together to defend immigrant youth, to protect our families, and to demand a future where everyone belongs. The vast majority of undocumented students today do not have DACA and are vulnerable to immigration enforcement. In recent weeks, this vulnerability was made painfully clear with the detention of Jimena Arias Cristobal, a 19-year-old Georgia college student, and Marcelo Gomez da Silva, an 18-year-old Massachusetts high school student, both of whom are young immigrants but not protected by DACA. These cases underscore the program's limitation and the urgent need for congressional action, especially in the midst of escalating threats against our lives. What we've seen in recent weeks, and especially this past weekend in Los Angeles, the deployment of National Guard and Marines to our streets, far beyond the limits of legal authority, is not about safety. It's a deliberate move to intimidate, to escalate violence against our communities, and to lay the groundwork for mass deportations across this country. This is just the tip of the spear. The writing on the wall could not be clearer. We must come together, we must organize, and we must deliver permanent protections now. The Home is Here campaign is deeply grateful to have the support of champions like Senator Durbin and Senator Padilla, Representative Sylvia Garcia and Representative Delia Garcia, all whom are here today to once more commit to this fight to win protections for immigrant youth and our families. I also want to express our deep gratitude for our Home is Here partners and allies, NILC, CASA, Forward.us, Voto Latino, CARE, Make the Road, and so many others who advocate and mobilize in defense of our people day in and day out. Can we give them a shout out? Woo! Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our first